Take me to another place where the fairy tales don't end. Magical, magical land. Magical land. To another place where the fairy tales don't end. Magical land.
Today's guest is a partnership developer, motivator, and public speaker. He has worked with the UN, the European Commission, governments, and leading private sector corporations to promote innovation, engage stakeholders, enhance lives, and build sustainable commercial success. Please welcome to the show, Brian Kilkelly. Hey, Brian, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thanks, Jens. Very well. Thank you for the invitation.
Great to have you. I'm really looking forward to our conversation because I think there are a lot of nuggets of what we can figure out. So before we go into the whole sustainability world, real estate and financing and so on, let's get a bit of understanding who you are, how do you connect your dots in your life, and understanding a bit about your story.
All right, great. Well, I live in Sussex in the UK, in the south of the UK. Originally, my family's from Ireland, but I was born here in England. And I've had quite a journey to where I am now. And it's involved working through kind of science degree, physics, going through selling computers, doing sales, then moving up through kind of sales, commercial sales, into kind of selling telecommunications networks on an international scale, working for companies like Ericsson, Marconi, doing business all over the world, and actually reaching a very successful sales career as salesman of the year for the whole of Europe, Middle East and Africa, and then having a crash, which was where I suddenly realized in my early 30s that actually what I was doing wasn't really very fulfilling. Very successful, making plenty of money, but actually I really got to a point where I was thinking, actually there's more to life than making money, and there's a world out there in great need. And I guess looking back, it was really coming back full circle to a moment in my life in my early 20s, where I spent 9 months in South America, traveling around with friends, and 3 months working for a Christian missionary organization in Rio with street kids. And those 3 months in Rio were really very informative because really experiencing poverty and life on the streets firsthand left a very strong understanding in me that actually there are many people who are struggling in life and need support. But also the experience of South America and the beauty of the Amazon rainforest and the natural world, Foz do Iguaçu, the incredible, waterfalls. So also just appreciation of the incredible natural world we live in. I think a combination of those things made me really feel in my 30s, like actually, I really want to spend my life actually helping people and helping make the planet more sustainable. So I shifted from sales into non-profit world, working for a charity for 4 years, taking my skills in sales into more kind of, I guess, fundraising, corporate fundraising, and building up my skills in that area and doing something I felt which would be more worthwhile. And during that time, I could the kind of topic of sustainability and the challenges the earth were facing were beginning to rise. And there was the Rio Earth Summit in 1992. And I guess, scientists were continually talking about climate change even back in the early 2000s. And so sustainability, I could see, was a huge issue. And I was looking for an opportunity to kind of take my experience of, I guess, building partnerships, building relationships, business development into that world. And I actually came across an advertisement for the Urban Land Institute. And they were looking for somebody to help grow their European network. And the Urban Land Institute, its mission was around sustainable land use. So it's about how does real estate, create products that are very good for people, but also for the environment. And I was successful at getting that role. And that's what started my journey, really focusing on cities and sustainability. spent 5 years with that institute, learning about real estate, about investment, about urban development, and built up a European network, or even a global network, in fact, in the real estate community. I got to a point with the Urban Land Institute where I could also see that there was a need to broaden beyond the real estate community and to embrace other sectors as well. So we're really going to fix the planet and actually make cities the best they can be. We needed to go beyond the kind of traditional real estate community and bring in other sectors like technology. So this is, I guess, where innovation started to really grow as well, that understanding of the need to kind of think about doing things differently. And ULI, Urban Land Institute, was quite good at celebrating innovation. But the innovation was still a little bit kind of within the boundaries of the real estate community. And I could see trends in technology with digital, and also trends around community engagement that were growing and were not really part of what we did. It got to the point where I actually felt that ULI was no longer a place that I could kind of, I guess, fulfill what I wanted to do. So I actually launched my own business called World Cities Network, which was very much around making cities more resilient and more sustainable. Ran that for 3 years, had great fun, great learning journey, but wasn't able to scale it to a point where I felt it could have a real impact. I was introduced to an organization called Climate Kick, Kick standing for Knowledge Innovation Community. It's a European Union funded climate innovation network. Amazing organization, receiving funding from the EU Commission to pass out to partners to build innovation, build out innovation ideas all around tackling climate. And I helped lead the kind of urban transformation part of that organization for 5 years, and learned a huge amount about climate innovation in that period. So I guess my history has taken me to this point now of, technology, sales, non-profit, corporate fundraising, real estate, climate innovation, and I'm now at a kind of an interesting crossroads of saying, interesting space of actually asking myself, how can I take those experiences and those skills to really tackle this enormous business opportunity, which I call the business of climate. So it's a massive challenge, climate change, but it's also an enormous business opportunity for those that can come up with ideas, businesses, initiatives that can help lead our decarbonisation effort.
Yeah. Tremendous story. So there's a lot to dig into. But so the podcast is around connecting the dots of innovation and entrepreneurship. And I have people from both worlds, like people who are into innovation and people who are into entrepreneurship. And when you say, hey, I've been salesman until there was a big crash, of course, that's something which sparks my interest. So tell us more about the crash and the situation. What happened to you as a person in that time?
Okay. So it was, I had an intense 2 years of, supporting Marconi in its development of a new product range and helping them to sell it internationally. And I had the opportunity to sell to British Telecom over in the Netherlands. So I was flying back and forth between London and Schiphol for a couple of years, building the relationship with British Telecom, and actually helping them solve some small level issues and building their trust. We got to the point where they came out with a tender for a massive 50 million euro optical network, national network, and they're looking for a supplier. And I was in there pitching and was successful. And in the end, I sold them 20 million euros worth of equipment, which was 4 times my target. So I was crowned Salesman of the Year. Actually walked away with a brand new Porsche Boxster as a reward for my efforts. And I was there on stage, getting my accolades, winning my trophy, Salesman of the Year. And at that point, I really thought I should be on cloud 9 here. I should be thinking this is the most amazing thing ever. But there was something inside me saying, this is not what it's about.
Yeah.
And that was my point when I realized that actually selling was not fulfilling, that there was more to life than selling. I guess it's part of my faith journey as well, with that, there are some values, some things which I learned in my journey as a Christian, which were about, it's not about you, it's about actually helping others. And so incredibly, actually, if we just after our own selves all the time, ultimately that is not fulfilling.
Yeah.
So that was a kind of pivot moment, going, right, I need to focus on the needs of others, not my own personal needs and satisfaction.
So stepping down from that stage, what did you do?
So I think that stage I thought, I had the sense that I wanted to kind of take the skills I had developed. I knew that I was very good at business development and selling. Where could I take those skills in somewhere where they could be applied in a way which I felt could be more fulfilling? And that led me to exploring the world of charity fundraising, corporate fundraising. And so I went out looking for roles around corporate fundraising. And actually, my first experience was a bit of a failure as well, because I landed a job at the Royal Academy in London, which was a very high-level arts institution. And they were looking for a development manager there. And I knew nothing about high-level art, but I thought, well, I'll give it a go. But that was unsuccessful. I spent 2 months there, and that didn't work out. But I didn't kind of let go of the dream that actually I knew I could bring something to charity fundraising.
Yeah.
And then I interviewed for a role with Age Concern, which was a charity that looks after older people. And I landed the role there as head of corporate fundraising. And that was a great 4 years, leading a team of 10 corporate fundraisers, really taking the issue of older people to lots of corporates who also wanted to align themselves with that as an area. So organizations like Tesco, Barclays Bank, Microsoft, they all had corporate social responsibility objectives, and they wanted to kind of support older people. So it was about building partnerships with those organizations that could support the charity's work, but also support those corporates in terms of their corporate social responsibility. So that was a learning journey about the kind of role of public-private collaboration, which I think has been a theme running through. How do we build these kind of co-benefits across different sectors?
How do you define relationships from your experiences in that part?
So I think it's key to kind of build understanding of each other. So really understand what are the objectives, what is it that the other organization is trying to achieve. So a lot of listening, a lot of careful listening, and really trying to understand where they're going, but also communicating what the goals, mission, objective of your organization is, and looking for that common ground. I think it's also really important to be prepared to walk away if there isn't a fit. And that's something I learned in my sales career very early on, that actually sometimes a sale wasn't worth pursuing for either side. And there was no point trying to make it happen, because actually it doesn't do either organization any good. And I had the amazing experience often where you'd actually walk away from a sale and the organization would go, no, don't go, Brian. No, come back. I'm sure we can work something out here. So I think, a relationship's about getting to an honest understanding of what you're both trying to achieve, and getting that kind of really established early on, and then things can flow very well from that point.
I will not go into the rabbit hole of sales, because I would have tons of questions, but we may maybe do them in a later stage or in a different setting, because I think that's also something which a lot of people would be interested in, understanding how you developed your sales strategies and your ways of thinking in sales. But that's not what we will dig into right now. So then you moved into the sustainability world. understanding sustainability and looking into how you could use your knowledge into that. So how do you describe sustainability from your perspective?
So sustainability for me would be it's anything really, anything you do in terms of lifestyle, work, way of living. Sustainability is, it's making sure that we're using the resources of the earth and of individuals as well in a way that can be continued. And I would say it's, in a way, I would say, we're returning what we've used in some way. So this idea of circularity, but I think it's gone even further now. It's, in that we've actually robbed the earth of so many resources that sustainability needs to move beyond just sustaining the status quo. It needs to now move to a point of restoration. So the way we run our businesses, the way we live our lives, the way we behave needs to be in a way which restores energy back into the world. So I see sustainability as a very holistic thing. It's about resource use. It's about equality as well. So sustainability means that there's benefits for everybody. So that, we have an equitable return for our efforts.
So if we now bridge this to the innovation world, you said within ULI, you have been working with innovation and sustainability in different contexts. So how did you take that? How did you work with these topics at that time?
Yeah, so in the last 5 years, it's been we've been funding as an organization innovation projects. And my role in particular here was about bringing together partners who had perhaps an idea for an innovation and creating an ecosystem in which that innovation could thrive. So it's very, very, very much about identifying and connecting partners together and building consortia that can really take forward an idea. And to do that successfully, it's about understanding what are the elements that you need to make an idea successful. So this is about recognizing the role of different sectors. So you've got business, you've got civil society, you've got academia, you've got lots of different ways in which you need to build an ecosystem for any innovation to be successful. So our work has been very much around creating the conditions for an innovation to succeed. Funding is part of it, of course, but also you need to have that kind of fertile ecosystem for an innovation to fly. And we've been learning that in terms of climate change, understanding the fact that it's not a complicated problem, climate change, it's a complex challenge. And understanding that what that means is it's very unpredictable in terms of, you can make an intervention and it can have knock-on effects that you can't understand. Yeah. So if we're truly to make a transformation, which we need to make happen, we need to take a different view to the transformation than what's happened historically. So over hundreds of years, mankind has been very successful at innovating incrementally. So we've had, fire, steam, industrial revolution, digital revolution, information revolution. These have been kind of iterative, fantastic advances we've made, building upon the previous advance. But they've been a fairly straight line, linear innovation. And we're now at a point where the planetary boundaries means that we can no longer continue on this straight line. We need to find much more imaginative, creative ways of making use of the resources we have in a way that produces, 10 times the amount of results from the same amount of resource. And what's exciting is it's completely possible if we use the right conditions. Yeah. So I'm excited about that.
It's digging more into that. So what's working, what's not working, and do you focus right now with this description on the real estate industry or more in general?
I think it is more in general. So I think in terms of innovation and innovation working, we in general need to make sure we provide the conditions for innovation to be really effective. So this idea of taking a systemic approach to innovation, I think, is hugely important. And that's been a great breakthrough in the last few years of kind of general understanding of the importance of systems change. So yes, we can have an electric car. Electric cars are fantastic, and that's a great point to innovation beyond the combustion engine. But electric cars will not solve our issue of getting down to zero carbon unless it happens within a complete systems change.
Yeah.
And so the transportation systems change involves, more walking, more cycling, electric cars, public transport. The whole system needs to change and shift. And that involves also thinking about planning as well, about where we put places. So you can look at transport and then start to understand how the things are all interconnected. And you can see that systems approach. Mm. When it comes to real estate, thinking about it systemically, one of the challenges real estate has is that the system is based upon taking a piece of land, building something new on it, and extracting value from that. But the idea of building something new on greenfield space is a system that needs to change, because we can't continue to eat up, land. We need to start rethinking how we use land, rethinking how we use buildings. And that then requires a systemic joined-up approach, which goes beyond individual real estate development and involves working with all elements of society and rethinking how we use buildings, how we use districts, how we use cities. So
if we go even further detail, what do you think need to change in a company environment? In, let's say, I'm a real estate developer or I'm a real estate owner. What do you think are the topics that need to change?
I think that the topics that need to change in real estate are real estate is making progress on many fronts in terms of reducing emissions, becoming more sustainable, looking at their kind of product. So, looking at how do they, for example, green their supply chain. There's a lot of great work going on there. But at the heart of that effort, there is an assumption that the existing business model can continue. And I would say what needs to change in real estate organizations is a kind of a step back from the very process of real estate value creation and starting to ask the question of, actually, what does a successful real estate company look like in 2030 in a zero carbon world?
Yeah.
How do we create value in that world? Can we continue creating value in the way that we currently do? So in a way, I think what needs to change is a complete look at the way the organization creates value. So it's almost like an organizational change. And the challenge there is that there is a need for reaching externally from the real estate organization and the real estate community to other sectors to learn and reach inspiration from how other sectors are moving through this journey.
So do you then say that the whole industry needs to change their approach of how they, let's say, work with their product and what their product is?
Yes, very much so. I heard a great statement a couple of weeks ago when I was hosting a call. One of my associates from Paris was talking about how there was a conversation about the need for more social housing. And the talk was all about we need to build more social housing. And many cities are talking about that as a topic. And Helene said, actually, it's not about building more social housing. It's about producing more social housing. And the heart of that statement was this idea that it's not necessarily to build more, but it's about looking at the current building stock we have and perhaps thinking about how we could change some of that existing building stock into social housing. So that's about reusing assets that we have. So it could be that a real estate organization in the future, the most successful one might not be a new real estate development company. It might be a company that actually is expert at repurposing buildings and creating new value out of existing buildings. Because there is so much embodied carbon in our buildings. We can't afford to tear them down and rebuild them. And that eventually will start getting priced in as as the world starts to recognize and put a price on embodied carbon, the value of existing buildings will start to really begin to rise.
That's an interesting thought. But that then also means, like you already scratched, the business model in itself need to change.
Yeah.
Like if I'm an investor, investing into, let's say, a new development, I'm putting money into something and I can calculate how I'm getting that back. So, and you then most probably get money out of the rental or however you're monetizing that on top of the market value you have from a real estate perspective. So what are the things that need to change then from your perspective?
I think one of the things that needs to change is how is the organizational setup. So kind of rethinking the kind of individuals and the kind of influences you have and the kind of questions you're asking yourself of your business model. So one of the challenges in real estate in particular is a lack of diversity. So if you look at most of the leading real estate organizations, the boards are made up typically of men in their kind of late 40s, early 50s, 60s. There's a real need for a kind of a shake-up in terms of the diversity of the boards, so that you're getting in fresh thinking there. There's also a need to really build a closer relationship with communities, to understand how communities are, what communities are looking for, what they, if you like, the younger generations are looking for in what they want out of their buildings and out of their lifestyles. So I think in terms of organizations, there needs to be diversity, new influences coming in. And there needs to be a rethink about those business models. I think also a recognition that we need to develop organizations that are more able to experiment and to learn. So I mentioned before about climate change being a complex challenge. So organizations that are able to organize themselves around how do we thrive in an environment which is chaotic and complex. And that means organizations need to create a culture of learning, experimenting, potentially failing, probably failing actually, and learning from that failure, and then learning from that and then moving on. And so real estate is, does take a lot of risks, and there's a lot of systems in place to protect yourself against risks. And perhaps some of those systems need to be looked at to try and work out how do we take risks in a calculated way and recognize that an element of risk taking is actually healthy for our organization, because we're trying to learn to get to net zero. And we're not going to do that unless we make some mistakes along the journey. And so you can imagine that requires some understanding of your stakeholders, your shareholders, that actually as an organization, you should be rewarded and measured by how well you're doing as a learning organization. So I'd argue that actually the most valuable real estate companies of the future will be ones that have an organizational culture and setup that is set up to be successful in tackling a complex challenge, rather than, I guess, historically has been a complicated business of real estate.
You just touched something which sparks my interest, measurement. So if you say, I mean, you always say what you measure gets done in this topic. So do you think there as well needs to be fundamentally things changed from a measurement system? How do you measure things?
I believe there does need to be, because there is a lot of focus currently, and quite rightly, on measuring the kind of how sustainable the product is. So we take real estate, you've got your buildings, you've got your materials, huge amount of focus on how do we source more sustainable materials, how do we reduce the emissions in terms of the construction process, the use of a building, so in terms of passive house standards, for example, lots of measurements and standards around that. But if we think about this complex challenge we're trying to deal with and the need for organizational change in order to be able to tackle that, what I don't see currently is measurements on how well an organization is doing on that journey. So if you like, the measurement of an organizational shift, how do we measure how well an organization is reinventing itself on this journey? How can I look at an organization and be able to judge whether or not they're putting in place the systems, the people, the processes that actually will lead them to zero carbon? Perhaps a measurement around diversity, a measurement around risk-taking, a measurement around their engagement with community, a measurement around how well they're connecting with outside of their normal professional circles. Perhaps there could be some measurements around that, which could be some indicators of organizations that are making good progress on their journey to zero carbon and towards an organization that's more likely to be successful in dealing with a complex challenge than others which are continuing as business as usual.
From my perspective, I mean, I've been working with real estate over the last 20 years, or at least connected to real estate. That's quite a big challenge in changing that. I mean, just looking at the organizational structure that needs to change, then the business model needs to change. So what are the things that don't need to change from your perspective if you look into real estate reaching a sustainable future?
What doesn't need to change? It's hard to imagine what would stay the same. I think a lot of it would change. I know there's a lot of fantastic, committed people in the real estate community. So I think the change needs to start with the individuals, with the people that are in the industry. So I would say, what we need to do is to support those individuals. Because I think there's a lot of great people who see the need to change and who are trying to make the change. They're in a way where I'm caught between despair and hope, I would say sometimes. Despair in that the enormity of the challenge and the fact that we are missing all of our targets. There was some goals set 10 years ago by the UN around biodiversity. We have failed to reach any of our biodiversity goals set 10 years ago. We have our Paris Accord commitments to keep the planet to 1.5 degrees. 5 years on, we're on a trajectory to hit 3 degrees. We're not even going towards 1.5 degrees. The current pledges are taking us towards 3 degrees. So in some ways, there's a lot of despair. In other ways, I'm so hopeful because there's so many great people and so much great innovation around. The challenge is not so much that we don't know what to do. The challenge more is that we're not sure how to do it. So I would say, the people in real estate, we need to create mechanisms to help them in the how to act now. They kind of know what they need to be doing, but it's how we do that. And I feel one of the answers to that is actually to create, again, going back to kind of fertile ecosystems, is to create environments where we can learn from each other on this journey. I sometimes think about it as, we're on a journey to zero. And over the next 10 years, we're going to move to that journey together. And we're going to be continuing to learn together. But we need to create kind of environments where we can support each other on that journey. In a way, we need to kind of build the courage to take some of these bold decisions and some of these risks. We all need to be doing that. And we need to create mechanisms within the real estate community to help each other on that journey.
What is the thing that needs to happen to get the companies into that direction, or the industry into that direction?
I think we need to break out of being comfortable with the typical pattern of going to conferences and webinars and having group discussions, kind of Q&As that really kind of skirt around some of the issues and don't get to the nub of things. And I think we get so far, we attend these events and we get some great inspiration and we learn what we need to do. And then we go back to our desks and then we're presented with the day-to-day challenges of keeping the business alive during COVID-19. And thinking to ourselves, I really should be dealing with this zero carbon journey. And I kind of know what I should be doing, but I don't quite get to it. And I think what needs to be fixed is we need to create mechanisms whereby, in a way, we can kind of support each other to address those issues. in my mind, I'm thinking that what is needed is more of a kind of a coaching network where groups of people can come together who can support each other on that journey to making those tough decisions. So it's almost like a self-help network. And that could be curated. And that's something which I'm thinking about and exploring, the idea of creating kind of a curated peer-to-peer coaching network where we can have groups of people who can build trust together and who are on a similar journey and can learn from each other and can be inspired by each other to kind of push beyond business as usual, to take some of these brave decisions and actually potentially put themselves in the front of the race to really exploit this opportunity, which is this business of climate change.
Yeah. So as I'm a coach as well, thinking about coaching, the people who would be taking this offer would be the early adapters, or the people who would be really like self-engaged into this topic. Today, what I see in the industry, that there might be a couple of people with that mindset, but it's not everyone. So do you think it needs one good example, a company who is turning around, a bigger or smaller one, which shows the way and is the leader in a direction, and then the others are following? Or do they need to a systemic push from governments and someone else?
I think maybe the former. I think the real estate industry is quite good at picking up ideas when they see it working.
Yeah.
Quickly picks things up. And I think that the heart of the issues around individuals supporting each other on this journey. Sure, some conditions towards that can be helped by government. Perhaps governments can be funding more organizations, initiatives in this direction, and that can happen in parallel. But I, in my heart, I can imagine it needs to start with a nucleus of organizations that are maybe already really pushing the boundaries here and are seeing this and are recognizing the need for support in this area. And those kind of leading organizations can then inspire and encourage others. But this could be something that could catch on quite quickly. I mean, we see in business already the power of peer-to-peer coaching. It's quite a commonly used technique, and there are many organizations already doing this. What I don't see currently is that this being applied to the climate challenge in a very specific way around organizational transformation. So peer-to-peer coaching happens around, how, for example, do I choose a successor for my business if I'm an SME, and there's peer-to-peer coaching around that. But actually, how do I completely transform my business model so that it can be successful in a zero carbon environment? I don't know today that currently peer-to-peer coaching has been used for those kind of things.
Oh, I haven't seen it.
but it could be. And
Yeah,
I think
definitely.
I think it lends itself to it perfectly.
Yeah.
Because the reality is, we don't know what the answer is for individual organizations in their individual markets and ecosystems. It will be different for every organization. So it's not like, you can go to a leading management consultancy firm and get your 10-point plan on how you get to zero carbon. I mean, those do exist. You can go to any leading management consultancy company and you can see they have their 10-point plan to zero carbon. And you read it and logically it makes sense, but it just isn't happening.
Yeah.
And as I say, it's because we know what we need to do, but actually how we do that comes down to personal decision-making. And that's where we need more support.
I love that way of thinking. And we could most probably take another 2 hours to go into that, but slowly getting to an end. So if you would have the chance to work with a project chosen by yourself, which would be attached to everyone on Earth, like something that's touching or people will be impacted from around the whole globe, what would it be and why?
I think that what's a really exciting space at the moment is kind of retail reinvention. So around Western Europe particularly, the States as well, a lot of the developed economies, the kind of crisis in retail with the shift to online working, COVID-19 accelerating that. We have town centres and city centres that are empty, that are failing, and we're wondering, what are we going to do with our town centres? And here in my local town, it's particularly a sharp reality because we were about to have the town redeveloped. So a lot of the shops were closed, ready for the redevelopment to happen, and some buildings were demolished. And now the whole process has come to a grinding halt. And the plan for the town centre was a new cinema, a bowling alley, some new restaurants. And you look at that now and you go, that's just not going to come. But the town council and the investor, that's their business plan. And it's completely stuck. And I'm like, in a way, I'm thinking, what an opportunity, because actually we have decimated our town centre. It's nothing. What a great time to rebuild it in a different way. So the opportunity to reinvent our town centres around sustainable lifestyles, around places that bring communities together, that restore communities, that restore the planet, is just a wonderful reinvention of the meaning of a city and the meaning of a town and the meaning of community. So I think that's a really exciting space to be, because it requires multiple sectors coming together. It requires business and government and civil society to come together to ask themselves the questions about what do we want the future of our town and our city to be, and how do we do that? So it requires a kind of an honesty, a kind of a recognition that actually what took us to where we are today isn't going to sustain us in the future. And in a way, and you might want to cut this out, but I'm hoping the lockdown doesn't end too soon. I'm hoping we don't return to normal just yet. And the reason is because this is such a fantastic opportunity for a bit of self-reflection.
I get that. I will definitely not cut it out, because on one hand, I agree. I did an exercise like, when was it, 2 weeks ago, where I looked into, supporting local retailer and saying, I reached out to them and say, I will help you for free as part of my mission. Let's look how I can help you. And nobody picked up that offer. And they're struggling. I mean, their stores are closed. And so I see your point, where it's, if the pressure gets higher and people are reflecting more, they might be thinking, maybe we really need to reinvent ourselves in a different way. So, I mean, of course, it's not good for society that everything is closed, but from that point, I get it. You just kind of feel that now's a moment. If we can grab it, then we could really not waste the COVID-19 crisis and use it as a platform to tackle the much larger crisis, which is climate change, and also the collapse of the natural world as well. So I'm sure you've seen the cartoon of the waves coming over. Yes.
I sometimes wonder to myself, there's a lot of talk about those waves hitting us, COVID-19, climate change, biodiversity loss. What happens when those waves hit the shore? What's happening on the shoreline around how we organize ourselves? And I see the SME community in particular being kind of ill-equipped to kind of deal with these waves as it hits them. And I'd love to play a role at helping the SME community re-equip itself to be able to tackle these waves.
That's a perfect lead into my next question, which is, where will you be in a year from now? And you can answer that in two ways, like more from a professional perspective or personal perspective. Either way is fine.
I think on both fronts, professional and personal, I'd love to be leading a movement that was supporting thousands of SMEs across Europe, across the world, being equipped and enabled and empowered to rethink how they do business in order to be able to support the restoration of the climate and the world. So that will be an amazing position to be in a year's time, to be kind of really empowering that change of how we rethink the way we run our businesses. Personally, I'd love to be seeing that happen locally as well. So in my own community. So, for example, I walk around my streets and I see so many houses, including my own, with 2 cars parked in front. And the opportunity for a car club is like screaming. And I've been talking about it with my friends, and I want in a year's time to be the person that has actually done something about that and started that car club, because there's no reason why I couldn't be successful. And so in a year's time, if I can walk around and see there's only 1 car, maybe even 0 cars in front of some people's houses, because there is this fantastically vibrant car club working locally, then I think I would see that we're beginning to transform.
I was just listening to a podcast this morning where the person was saying the thing that's differentiating people from being successful is taking an idea and just running with it and figuring it out. So maybe that's something for you as well. Yeah. So last question. How do you keep yourself informed? What are the different topics you dig into? Podcasts, books, websites, newspapers? How do you keep track of what's going on in the world?
Yeah, I use a variety of sources. So the kind of traditional online sources like LinkedIn and Twitter. I've built up over years, I guess, connections to lots of different leading organizations, think tanks, World Economic Forum, different individuals, yourself, Jens. I found your work very inspirational. So getting feeds of information, but also, so I see it on different levels. So there's kind of the global kind of information sources. I subscribe to Medium, for example, so see articles coming in there. Also, nationally, there's some great organizations. I'm a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts, Manufacturers and Commerce, the RSA. Some great lectures on the RSA, great community there. But also locally. So, working with the local council here and local kind of innovators in my community. And I'm part of a faith community as well. So my local church is also a great inspiration, great speakers there, great teaching there as well. So it's a very eclectic mix of sources. What I try and do is make sure that I have a good diversity of sources. And I'm reading more. So I'm reading a book at the moment from Tier Fund, and it's looking at how really kind of looking at the climate and the natural world from a spiritual point of view, and that's a really interesting insights into kind of thinking about the earth from a spiritual point of view. That it's not just a physical thing; it's also spiritually important as well, and there's an enormous amount we can learn from faith teachings, and just looking at how Native Americans, Aboriginals, different cultures have treated the earth and how they've recognized the importance of looking after Mother Earth. And that's something which, I think we've been beginning during lockdown to reconnect in a way with nature. And that's been a fantastic shift, which, hopefully we'll all continue to connect more strongly with nature. And I think that'll really help drive some of the decisions that we're seeking to make as we start to value nature more.
Yeah. Beautiful. I would love to get the link as well, and I will put it into the show notes for the people listening who are interested in that. Where can people find you and reach out to you?
I guess currently it's on LinkedIn. So I'd love to hear from you. So reach out to me on LinkedIn. I am, exploring the idea of taking this idea of a kind of peer-to-peer coaching around organizational change in real estate and beyond. I'm calling that Journey to Zero. So you may see a journeytozero.org being launched in the coming weeks. So perhaps look out for that as well. But in the meantime, find me on LinkedIn.
Super. Brian, thank you very much for your time. It was a pleasure talking to you. I think there are a lot of nuggets for the listeners to dig into further and in different ways of thinking. Thank you very much for being on my show.
Thanks, Ian. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take me to another place where the fairy tales don't end. Magical, magical land, magical, magical land. To another place where the fairy tales don't end. Magical, magical land.